Hello and welcome everyone, and thank you for joining us for today's webinar, Board Portals, a Case for a More Effective Board. This webinar is brought to you by BoardVantage, and as usual is hosted by corporate board member and the NYSE Euronext. It is certainly my pleasure to have you with us once again. My name is T.K. Kerstetter, and I am President of Corporate Board Member. I want to thank you all for participating in today's call, and especially welcome the members of our board education program joining us today. If you aren't aware of our board education program, it has the ability of your board for a flat fee to attend all our live events and webinars, and gives you the opportunity to inform your shareholders that you're making efforts to be an informed board. To learn more about this program, you can go to boardmember.com and click on the Board Education Program logo on the left side of your screen. Before we get started with today's webinar, I would like to go over a few housekeeping details. First, we will email you today's PowerPoint slides after the call. Also, you should see an icon with the word scale towards the top right hand of your screen. You should use this to adjust your view of the PowerPoint presentation to ensure that you have a full view. And also, please turn off your pop-up blocker and turn up the volume on your speakers. Second, you should see a box in the bottom left-hand corner for typing in questions. Participants may submit questions throughout the presentation by selecting Q&A session from the pull-down in the chat pod located on the lower left corner of your screen. All you do then is type and send your question by hitting Enter. We encourage you to submit questions early and often, and we'll do our best to answer all questions. We will try during the Q&A to make this as interactive as possible, so please feel very comfortable in submitting your questions at any time during the presentation, and we'll have a formal Q&A period left at the end. Finally, if you are experiencing any technical difficulties, please visit the webcast help guide by clicking on the Help button at the top of your screen. You may also use the Ask a Question area to alert us of any technical difficulties, or you may call 877-297-2901. I'll repeat that again. That's 877-297-2901. Once again, thanks again for joining us today. This topic on board portals is certainly something that has got a lot of momentum to it. At Corporate Board Member, we have a favorite saying. It's not if every board will eventually have a board portal, but more importantly, when. We fully suspect that this technology and the ability for a company to have a more effective board through this tool is something that will continue to gain momentum, and has certainly gained a lot of momentum with the introduction of the iPad as a way to deliver the board portal. To address this issue, I'm pleased to be joined today by Joe Ruck and Mary Frenchi. Joe is President and CEO of BoardVantage. He is an expert speaker and blogger on the impact of new technology, meaning communication portals, tablets, social media, that occur in the boardroom and in the C-suite. Mary is the Vice President of Sales and Account Management for BoardVantage. She is responsible for driving business in both the new and existing markets across the globe, and is responsible for service delivery and support of all clients. With that, it's my pleasure to turn this program over to Joe, and Joe, it's all yours.
TK, thank you very much, and welcome everyone. What I like to do today is to take maybe 30 minutes or so, along with Mary, to lay out the steps that you need to take to go paperless and discuss what considerations should go in that decision. Now, we have probably about 100 attendees on this call, and they run the gamut all the way from folks who may be considering a board portal for the first time to existing BoardVantage customers who've been with us for a few years, relatively new BoardVantage customers, and perhaps others who are currently in an evaluation stage. So with such a diverse group, we thought that the best way to approach the topic is use a roadmap that outlines the specific steps on how to get to that paperless boardroom, and then you can take those steps in a time frame that makes the most sense to you. Now, in the interest of the schedule, particularly because we want to leave plenty of time for the Q&A, we're going to skip the standard company preamble. If you'd like to learn more about BoardVantage, I'm going to direct you to our website, where you can find background on the company, the leadership, and plenty of product information. There is a question that I would like to address before getting started, and it is a question that I get asked all the time, and it's probably on the mind of at least some of you, and that is the board today ready for technology? That's a fair question. We're talking about going paperless. I mean, you may say, well, technology is no stranger in the boardroom. You know, it has been there for years, and everybody knows that adoption has been scattered. What has changed now? And what our answer to that would be is that it ties into what we're seeing every day in our business now, which is that we're seeing a great increase in the number of users and a great increase in the amount of use of the product. We see that through our requirements for bandwidth increases, storage increases. We've been a company who had its main data center on the West Coast of the United States for a long time. We'll be opening up an East Coast data center in this coming month, and followed shortly towards the end of the year with data centers in Amsterdam and Singapore, all of that being driven by requirements for more use and more users. But the other thing that is notable, besides this quantitative change, is also the qualitative change, because a couple of years back, the primary customer for BoardVantage was a technically savvy director, a whole cadre of them, ones that were very comfortable with technology, but now that is opening up to the more traditional directors who may frequently even be novices. And we're going to an environment where previously we were used almost exclusively for corporate boards that is now expanding to subsidiaries, special projects, leadership team application, as well as M&A. And we're seeing a greater diversity in market as well. Again, as a company based in California, clearly our home market is North America. We expanded to the European Union, but more recently we've had very good success in the Pacific Rim, Latin America, and even in the Middle East. So what you're seeing is that the slope of the adoption curve, which for years was moderately flat, is now all of a sudden hockey sticking up to the right. Now, the other thing that we're seeing is that the reason for it is not necessarily that somehow boards, perhaps mysteriously almost, have had a change of heart about the value of technology, but instead it's a more straightforward answer. What we're seeing is that there's a cumulative improvement in technology, and it simply now has reached a point where that technology has now become useful and beneficial in the boardroom itself. You know, consider it a tipping point. So to us, it's less of a matter of whether the board is now being ready for technology, and more of a matter that technology has simply gotten ready for the boardroom. And I think that's germane because I think sometimes there is a fear that the board should have some sort of an intangible ingredient to adopt technology, but that's practically not what we're seeing. So if you have a board with a typical blend of progressive and traditional directors, you can go in with the confidence that they can deal with what's available today. Now, one thing that when you have a great deal amount of technology change, as we've seen here, there always is, of course, one thing that's a trigger, and no surprise, that trigger here is, of course, the iPad. And if you think about the typical day in the life of a director, that makes a great deal of sense. It's a day that is typically filled with meetings, discussions, a lot of document review, and of course, directors are always on the go. So there's, when you summarize it, a lot of reading and a lot of travel in the director job description. Well, those are areas where the iPad shines. It combines the immediacy of online access with the readability of print. So it excels in those areas where directors really needed to see the most improvement to get value from technology. And you could almost argue that in one fell stroke, Apple has cleared out the two most important stumbling blocks that stymied adoption of technology in the boardroom. And then along the way, it has created this new attitude towards technology among directors that simply couldn't be more different than the one that existed even 2 or maybe 2.5 years ago in the pre-iPad days. And there's a chart that I have here on the left-hand side that shows what some of these changes reflect. We're seeing where in the past there was minimal use. Typically, a director would access a system from home, a casual check of the content before the board meeting, to nowadays where you have heavy use, where directors carry their iPads with them wherever they go, which is the second item that I'm highlighting here, because even though laptops are almost by definition a portable device, in the boardroom they actually weren't used as portable devices, because typically the director would have a laptop at home, and then the IT department, certainly in a lot of large companies, would have laptops ready to be used in the boardroom when the directors arrived. And at the end of the meeting, the IT department would simply tuck them away for use in the following board meeting. So the mobile experience that most executives and other members of corporate America have wasn't really the experience that was seen by most directors. But that has changed. With the iPad, they truly have gone mobile. And so now what you're seeing is because these benefits are being realized, that the attitude among many directors, which has gone from maybe benevolent skeptics to what may be characterized as enthusiastic advocates of technology. And it's created a shift where boards that, even if they may have been using some technology, typically had split access, where there were boards that, or directors that were online, and other directors were paper, what we refer to as split access, that environment is now changing to a comprehensive paperless environment because of the iPad, because everybody, whether you are a novice or whether you are a tech savvy, can easily deal with this technology. So by and large, you can think of the iPad as a breakthrough in usability. But of course, if you want to build a secure channel for board communication so that you can go paperless, you're going to need more than that. And that's where the board portal comes in. So let's take a look at the success factors that you have to take into consideration in order for you to go paperless. We've identified 5 of them, and we've built functionality in the product to address all of them. The first one is mobility, which in our view has a special place in the world of boards. We just talked a minute about travel, and a lot of it being driven by the geographic dispersion of many directors. We think that's the norm, not the exception. And what that means is that as a good board portal, you're going to have to deal with the offline requirement that it imposes on the experience. So we're going to talk about that. Security has always been integral to board portals, but now with this newfound mobility, it imposes a new set of challenges that needs to be addressed, and it needs to be addressed well. We're also going to talk about that. The third is control. What control refers to is the piece that captures the flows in board process. In a way, it's the least glamorous of what's going on inside the board portal. It's somewhat invisible sometimes for directors. You could argue it's the hidden mechanics that let you go paperless, but it's essential, particularly for large boards or large company boards who have a lot of process in their communication. The fourth element is the experience. It's clear to most people that if you request any group to change process, irrespective of what that group is, if it's something that they have relied on for years, you're going to need to give something in its place which is both better and richer than what they have today. We want to talk about that in the user experience. And the final point is interactivity, because once you go paperless, it begins to shift, where the traditional one-way communication, which is, of course, what you have with paper, we send out a book, and once it's been delivered by either UPS or FedEx, there's no way to communicate back. That traditional one-way communication is now shifting to two-way communication. And that reflects sort of the broader trend then from a portal mode to a platform mode. So think about the iPad along those lines as not an end, but rather a beginning of the process. So let's start on mobility. As I mentioned, mobility has a special place in the world of boards, and there's a bit of a paradox there. Because while we live in this very connected, increasingly online world, offline remains central to the board experience. And what that means is that in order for you to go paperless, you need a system that lets your directors go online and offline and switch between those two modes rather seamlessly. Just think about this one example. If the director goes to the meeting, will carry an iPad with him or with her. Once they're on the airplane, of course, they're going to be out of connection with Wi-Fi, but they're going to want to review the board book, so it means that it has to be done offline. Once they get in the meeting, they're going to want to pull out their iPads, look at the documents, refer to their notes that they made beforehand. Again, they're going to be offline. And this is no coincidence when the iPad first took off in the marketplace, which is about a year and a half ago now, that the demand for offline access shot up right along with it. And so this is a very major use case. It's integral to the board experience, and that because it's happened so frequently, it must be seamless. And it needs to take into account the typical scenario where a corporate secretary will upload a board book and then perhaps 2 days later add in a section, make a modification, a last-minute update, that all those changes that take place can be transparent to the director and don't require additional work on his or her part. Because, again, like I said, it's such a frequent use case that if there's any real work required, it would become frustrating and the directors would not be supportive of it. The second element is the notion of security. Now, security is something that everybody understands is critical in a board portal, and frequently, it's cast just along the lines of external hacks. External hacks are, of course, something that every good portal should protect against, and you do it with encryption, authentication. There's other things like certificates. But it's not just external hacks you should be worried about. You also should be worried about internal breaches from disgruntled employees that could potentially be very, very serious as well. Those kinds of things take hardening. There's also the protection against human error. We all know that digital communication is prone to oversharing. So a good portal should have an architecture that disallows that kind of thing. But for this presentation, what I would like to focus on is the threat that is probably the number one concern for directors, and that is discoverability. And with the iPad, this threat has only grown. So now, besides having strong platform security, which is the kind of thing you use to protect against external threats, you need strong mobile security to mitigate or offset the threat of discoverability. And the key thing here is a system that enables central administrative control, which lets the GC or corporate secretary enforce the organization's retention policies independent of the actions that the users, in this case directors, may take. And this has become so important in the post-iPad world because directors now carry their iPads wherever they go. If you look at a board portal a couple of years ago, in this much more static environment, all the content of the board books would stay on the server. So it always stayed under the control of the administrators. But now, with it on the iPads, there needs to be this ability to reach out and take action on those, to clean them out as the case may be. And if you think about what a director does, a director jumps on a plane, wants to review the material. What they will do is download that board book. They will pull it up when they're out of Wi-Fi range. If they don't have a good, secure way to do that, they will simply download it on the iPad and view it in a tool, perfectly good tool, maybe something like Goodreader, but very insecure. So what you need is a system where any board content that is downloaded by directors from the portal remains under central control of the administrator, so that even in the event that the director neglects to delete his or her own notes, the GC can then manage that task from a central control and delete those notes remotely. And at that point, what you have then is a system that is not dissimilar to the practice of collecting board books at the end of a face-to-face meeting and then shredding all those paper board books at the close of the meeting. Now, if you don't have a system like that, you're going to run the risk of subjecting the company and directors to a range of discoverability threats that could be quite serious. So that, again, it's where something like syncing in the briefcase comes in. The important thing is to look for systems that have that kind of capability. The third element is what we refer to as control. And control is something that we think of as a cousin of security. And let me give you a brief description to highlight what the differences are. Whereas security is about blocking unauthorized users from getting access. Control is about differentiating access among users who are authorized. And that's really a big part of board process because it's a lot about who sees what and when do they see it. And if you look at the side here, there is a as a gray box that gives you some of those examples. Now today I would argue that that level of control, who sees what and when do they see it, is what you have in your possession with paper. It's slow, it's inefficient, but it does work. Now before you go paperless then, you need to be able to replicate that level of control in your online system. And what that means, technically speaking, is you need something that lets you map all the users against all the assets, essentially a control matrix. And now what you can do is you can target content to one set of users, while at the same time restricting access to a second set of users. And that lets you then capture the nuances and the distinction of paper process. So today, for example, you may print out a preliminary version for the chairman to get feedback. In BoardVantage, you can do that by temporarily screening out the rest of the board while the chairman gets access. And upon approval, you can then grant viewing rights to the full board. So you now accomplish the same thing, full security, no viewing for the whole board until approved, and then full viewing once approved. Or maybe what you do is that you print multiple versions of a book and send out those unique versions to different recipients. So we handle that not by constructing multiple versions, but by creating a single version with all the content, and then we black out particular sections of the book depending on the viewing rights of the recipients. So this is the kind of board process that you're all familiar with, but before you can go paperless, you need to be able to capture all of that. Otherwise, you find that things that you've developed over the years that is tied into your process would not be workable online. Now, the good news that all of this is available now, but you should be looking for it because it's not present in every single solution. The other thing that I would say is that to do that, you need back-end tools, and those tools should be straightforward to use because the administrators, the staff in the corporate secretary office, has to be self-sufficient with them. And because a lot of stuff that happens is done on a short notice, perhaps users are added or removed, perhaps a new director joins, perhaps a lawyer is added into the review process, maybe a whole new workspace is formed to collaborate around a specific project, maybe a password has to be reset, and any number of examples like that. What it means is that the administrator needs to have the self-sufficiency to make those assistants quickly without the assistance from IT or a third party. So the goal then here is to get a system that lets you exercise the same level of control as you have in your paper environment, but at the same time, with the benefit of the software, get a big increase in your team's productivity. So those three elements, mobility, security, control, are kind of the building blocks that allows you to go paperless. But as I said in my opening comments, if you expect people to switch from one process to another process, you've got to make it worth their while. And you need to give them something that is better, something that is richer, and something that's more functional. So the way we think about it is that step one, you've got to capture all the basics. So that means document access, bookmarks, the ability to capture notes, those kinds of things. But to make it richer, today, in the context of the iPad, with all its graphics and animation, you have an opportunity to make it much cooler. And so, on one hand, as you make it cooler, and on the other hand, you work with the constraints of that relatively small screen, there is an opportunity here to reimagine how you do things. And that's how you wind up with notes that are movable. That's how you wind up with things like drop-ins to mark a particular page. That's how you wind up with e-signature. And so there's this idea of capturing the basics, then reimagining them, but there's also the need to conceptualize new flows, to basically make things possible that you could never do in paper. And let me give you a couple of examples of that. One is the timeline, the ability to access meetings, access previous meetings. So basically you can get a repository of all the previous meetings, all at your fingertips. So effectively what it is a way to make very dense information available in a ready access form. But there are others as well, things like secure email. I know you all use email, but the typical email that is out and available, this isn't really suitable for board work because it doesn't protect confidentiality. And now here's some software that we have that is tied into the board portal that lets you exchange confidential messages without having to worry about breaches. So the goal then is not about reaching parity with paper. That's something that can be done relatively easily, but it's really about making it better, about delivering an experience that is better than paper. And once you can do that, then you can make it so that it becomes a common platform for all directors, an inclusive experience, not just for the tech-savvy ones, but also for the more traditional and novice ones, just because they can immediately recognize the value of the experience. So the final point goes to interactivity, and let me give a little bit of context here. If you go back over the past 15 or 20 years, and if you see what's been happening in the world of technology, first in .com and then with social, a lot of these very important technological developments, they were developments that happened outside the boardroom. Now, you could certainly say that boards were on the sidelines when it came to those kinds of trends. But that was pre-iPad. Post-iPad, that is all changing. And from our interactions with boards today, it almost seems to us sometimes like directors are making up for lost time, that they're very eager to get new functionality. Now, if you take a look at this slide, what you see here is a screenshot we took of our product section of the website, and the drop-down there shows all the functionality we have to capture board process and either from a director's point of view, an administrator point of view, or from a leadership team point of view. And so clearly what it communicates is you got maybe, 24 different pieces of functionality there, that you actually need quite a breadth of functionality before you can begin to go paperless. But there's probably even a more important message in there, is that where in the past the demand for new functionality from directors was sporadic, now all of a sudden demand for new functionality is pervasive. And we're seeing this ongoing demand now where directors, customers are continually asking us for more and additional things to capture process that they've had for some time, or process that they would like to implement but never had a chance to. So to give you some perspective on that, in the past 6 months, since the latter part of 2011, in December we first offered the approval module, then in Q1 we offered secure email, and then in Q2, just about a month ago, we added e-signature. And as I look at our roadmap going forward, I know we have a big release coming in September, which is going to do a great deal around the meeting experience, and then another big release coming in December. So what you see here is that the iPad has not created an environment where once you're in it, everything is static. No, it's created an environment where once you're in it, it's the beginning of a new way of beginning to communicate. If there's one thing that I would point to, is that a lot of this functionality that is being added now is two-way. It's collaborative. It's functionality that allows you to interact rather than just absorb. And so as you look at these 5 factors, before I'm going to turn it over to Mary right now, I would say that as you look at the various portals, think about these kinds of things. Think about what it is that you're trying to accomplish. Are you looking to implement something just to satisfy a couple of tech-savvy directors, a matter of convenience, or are you looking for the goal that most companies are interested in now, which is to go paperless? Once you want to go paperless, you need something which is broader, which allows you to address or mitigate the discoverability risk, and which allows you to create that good online-offline experience that is so central to the board experience. So with that, I'm going to now turn it over to Mary, and Mary's going to step through the actual steps to go from the basics of just first getting an association to Board Portal to all the way, perhaps 6 months down the line, moving into the board process and collaboration arenas. Mary?
Thank you, Joe. Good afternoon, everybody. So starting with the initial step of the interest, and so this is basically the evaluation step where someone will reach out to us. We'll schedule an initial web demo. During that hour presentation, we will walk through in great detail primarily the iPad for the director view and how your directors and your executives would be able to interact with the iPad. And then we do a live demonstration of the back end for the corporate secretary administrators in the process of loading those materials and building out board books, the workflows, permissions, everything that you would need to know from a board process standpoint. And then the next step, of course, is now allowing you to socialize it internally. So we have videos and, of course, a large volume of documentation, best practices that you can also use to socialize. And then typically there's a follow-on demo with the executive team or the decision makers that want to be involved. Along with that, in parallel, there could be a test instance. And a test instance is a great way to play around with the technology. So you get access to the portal. You would get a quick training. We have a dedicated team for the test instance that would give you a quick training. You'll be able to upload your own documents. You're in a secure environment. You can build your board books. You can actually share them with a few directors. Maybe there's a committee, a few key board members or executives that you want to experience it on the iPad with your materials to get a sense of the ease of use. You can definitely accomplish that in the test instance, and that usually will last anywhere to 2 to 4 weeks depending on your time frame. Also in parallel, there's usually a security review. We always encourage our prospects to take a deep dive into security. We actually use our product and we provide access to what we refer to as the security audit portal. It has about 60-plus documents in there, all our documentation in regards to our back-end security, third-party audits, our staff reports, etc. All can be accessed. And the nice thing is your security team can actually have direct contact or interaction with our security folks. We have the ability to post questions where we can respond and share as much information or detail as required. So once you are kind of in the interest or evaluation phase, the next step is the implementation. So once you've made your decision on your portal, what we like to do at that point is kind of take you through an implementation phase with your account manager. You're assigned an account management team, so you basically have your lead account manager, but then you have a group of individuals that will be able to support in the training and the setup of the portal. The minute the contract is signed, it's usually about a 48-hour period where we can have your portal active. At that point, we can begin the training, the provisioning of the administrators. We have, of course, resources. We have full online support as well, 24-hour support. And then when it comes to the directors, there's a couple different things we can do. For the administrators, we will offer on-site training if they wish, or we can also accommodate 3 online sessions as well, depending on their comfort level with the technology. And the whole idea with the training of the administrators is to get them as comfortable as possible with what we refer to as the alpha process. So we will use their documents. We will walk them through the process from beginning to end in regards to uploading documents, creating their agendas, setting the permissions, as Joe was mentioning earlier, where you can build out a specific board book, maybe want someone to review it first. So we will take everybody through that process that we typically see for a majority of our clients in preparing for board meetings. The main goal is to get you live with your first meeting, as quickly as possible. When it comes to training the directors, we have a couple different options there. We can do phone training, of course, on a one-on-one environment where we walk them through the app, whether it's the iPad and the browser. These days it seems to be just the iPad. We're also happy to come out to board meetings, do presentations to your board, give them a quick 10, 15-minute overview, address questions. A lot of times they want to hear about the security, the discoverability, what happens to their notes. They have their own concerns, so we're able to address those during that meeting to ensure everyone that has been looked at and evaluated and under control. And then after the initial training, you can then now roll it out to your board. Like I said, if you do the training in advance or at the meeting, you're now on to your first online meeting, and that can usually happen anywhere between 4 to 6 weeks. It really, at that point, depends on the client timeline. After the initial meeting, we just kind of do a recap, make any adjustments as required. Another thing that will usually come out of that board meeting overview is you'll get some ideas from your board of how they may want to use the portal. Book access is great, but maybe they want to do more with it. Maybe they want more documentation, more frequency of information, so that we can all kind of adjust and cater your portal to the needs or requirements of the board. So with that being said, let's take a look at kind of how we see it. From BoardVantage's perspective, we look at the first step as what we refer to as book access. So this is more of a one-way communication where you, of course, want to make all the materials available for meetings. So you could have your board meeting, your several committee meetings. You want to aggregate all that information and present it to your board. Once you've generated your board books with the links for easy navigation, you once again notify your board. They can now put that information in their briefcase, or actually you can push it to their briefcase. So from a director's perspective, it's very seamless. They get a notification from you. They log into their iPad. It automatically starts syncing, pulling those materials into their briefcase, and now they're ready to do their annotations or notes, whether online or offline. And the nice thing is everything is contained within the briefcase, once again, control, as Joe was mentioning earlier. And from a director's perspective, if they get to the hotel, get to the meeting, something's been updated or modified, it will automatically sync the next time they connect to ensure they're viewing the correct information. And so that's what we refer to as book access, and that usually will take most clients through, the first 1 or 2 meetings. And then soon after, they'll start moving into what we refer to as the board process. And this is more of the process in regards to online approvals. So now they want to be able to approve documentation. Like we just mentioned, the instructions of e-signatures, so now they can sign documents from their iPad. They also want to be able to communicate with fellow board members or peers, so we have secure email. And that's different than your regular email in the sense that it's all contained inside the portal. So once again, you do have the control over the retention policies. Or once again, if you don't want to use functionality such as secure email, if you have concerns around that, then you can just simply disable that function. So you can enable this functionality as needed for your board, for your requirements. There's also the timeline, which gives them a comprehensive view of past meetings, current meetings, or even just kind of a heads up of upcoming meetings and agendas. After board process, we've also seen a frequency, or an increase, I should say, of folks moving on to more of the collaboration. And with the BoardVantage platform, we easily allow clients to move beyond even just the board process, and sometimes this happens in parallel. Executives will get access to the board portal in order to access board materials or interact with the board, share information. But they also want to be able to maybe have a different environment for their executive team, their leadership team, or maybe just a different department within the organization altogether. So we have the concept of team spaces where they can have their own repository and do more rich document editing, be able to modify redline documents maybe in preparation of a board meeting. They can do all this communication and circulation of documents inside of BoardVantage. And then once again, when it's ready, they can just simply accept the changes, change the permissions, and include those in board books or socialize those with the board. One of the questions that the audience posed was, what do you do outside of just board meeting preparation or materials? And this is an area where you can see where you can use BoardVantage for much more than just distribution of board materials. A lot of our clients will use the new items where they'll post items of interest, new financial filings. A lot of our clients, the CEO, or other executives will post weekly items of interest or just a quick summary or update of what's going on with the organization, maybe a different team space for some M&A activity or other strategic projects. So there is a great volume of usage outside of just the board. And the last thing here is from the administration side. Of course, we can't forget about the corporate secretary's office. We don't want to increase their workload, so we've put a lot of thought and process into the workflows and the features and functions that would be required for them to be successful. So, of course, with the permissions module where you can set permissions by user, by committee, by document, by folder, the admin module, as Joe touched on earlier, where you can have full control from an administrative site of removing users, adding users, etc. Being able to take a quick look at all those approvals, making sure you're getting all the signatures and responses in a timely fashion, being able to print those or save those, file those for your permanent records. And there's the whole concept of content segregation across maybe, like we said, if you're having a board versus an executive team.
All right, Mary. So I think that wraps up this summary of the presentation. Now we can go over to Q&A. TK, do you have any questions that you would like us to address?
Yes, we've had some listeners that have questions that if you and Mary are ready, we'll get right into those. First one was phrase, for listeners who are already using the board portal, how are they using the portal other than posting board meeting materials? And so, Joe, I'm sure you have experience with a lot of companies that have taken this to the next level.
Yeah, so that's under that category that we refer to as board process, right? As Mary went through her presentation, she described the first 2 major phases. The initial one is one of book access, and that's really just about one way of just giving access to the materials so that you can review the board book, anywhere where you are, whether that's at home, traveling, or in a hotel. But as you go to board process, then you go to that 2-way interactivity. So, Mary, you want to give some examples of that?
So the examples there would just be the more frequency of sharing of information. It also helps with director adoption to start sharing materials outside of just board meeting materials, financial information, SEC filings, posting your director handbook or just, information in general, charters, bylaws, resolutions, everything that the director may need to be aware of. It's also very helpful for immediate communication. Maybe you have to have an urgent meeting with a committee. It allows you to communicate with that committee immediately in a secure environment, share documents on the fly as required.
If you wanted to add things to your portal, whether they be educational, board education, or just some news events or anything, that's all programmable by the individual companies, correct?
That is correct, yes.
Okay, next question. Have you seen a growth of boards of state government agencies utilizing board portals?
So the growth that we have seen is our roots as a company really are in the Fortune 500 and their large enterprises. We have since moved well beyond that, and we're doing a lot in healthcare. We're doing actually a lot in nonprofits. Higher education is big for us, and we actually have a few state agencies, but it's only an emerging market. Interestingly enough, we're seeing a paralleling of that overseas actually. Where typically this is the kind of thing that in the past you would have seen the trail being blazed in the U.S. Now it actually seems that for state agencies, we're seeing more action overseas than we're seeing it in the U.S. Maybe that's related to budget crunches. I really don't know. But what is also true is that much of the requirements that you face in a corporate or in a public company board, that same kind of process, even with some adaptations, actually has applicability in the public sector. So, yeah, the need is there. Like I said, we're seeing some demands for it here. We see more demand for it overseas. We expect to see more demand in the future, but we also wonder to what degree budgets may not be limiting the opportunity right now.
Next question. Are companies providing the actual iPad to directors? What is the trend?
So currently, no. I would, right now, most of clients, the directors already have iPads. For those that do not have iPads, they kind of gift them to the directors, and the whole idea is they want the directors to control the iPads because when it comes to updates or modifications, if you come a question of if they are putting their iTunes corporate accounts on there, if a director needs to update the app over the weekend, then they have to try to locate someone from IT to get that password, etc. So we have seen majority of our clients that the directors already have them, or once again they're gifting them, but the directors are establishing their own iTunes account and kind of managing and controlling their own iPad.
Let me add to that, because it's a really a good question in the sense that in the laptop days, laptops frequently were procured by the company for the directors, and IT would centrally procure them and distribute them. But with the iPad, because the Apple's use model and how an owner of the device is tied to the user, referring back to what Mary described about the need to take care of updates at times and when no IT is available, the only way to really do that to the satisfaction of the director is to have them actually take ownership of that equipment. So that's another example of these pretty significant changes that the iPad kicked in. Because it used to be the standard that companies procure them, but that's no longer the case.
And just to be clear, that doesn't mean that the companies aren't gifting them to them.
Yes, they are. They are. Gifting is a very common thing to do. It's just that the idea of who holds title to it and how IT supports it, is what's different, and that drives that gifting activity. Ultimately, I guess you could still say that the company pays for it, but it's a different way of distributing it than what we had before.
Right. Next question. Is it fairly standard to have a 1-year retention policy whereby documents are deleted after 13 months in the portal?
Most of our clients will enforce a retention policy, and it's entirely up to that client. Some clients are more stringent. They're saying after the meeting, they're basically going in and wiping out the briefcase and retracting all the information from the briefcase and removing it from the portal. That's one extreme. Other clients, I would say on average, it's up to 12 to 24 months of retention. The nice thing here is what they could do with the permission module is a lot of our clients after the 12 months or let's say 13 months, they can remove access just from a director's perspective because typically the general counsel, corporate secretary would need to retain a copy of all those materials for future reference. but now the directors may say not have access to it, or once again, they could delete it permanently as well from the portal. It's entirely up to individual clients.
Okay, next question. I often want to keep portions of the board book, perhaps my notes or items for further study. How would this work?
That kind of plays into a little bit of the whole, as I was just mentioning, about the permissions as well. So once again, they can keep a copy of the entire board book with the annotations or a copy of the board book without the annotations. They could also keep sections. They could, rebuild probably a separate board book if for litigation purposes, and then they could move that to a different folder and kind of keep that as their archive folder. Once again, only visible or accessible by the individual users, for future reference.
Next, what is the feedback you receive from the corporate secretary team? Is it a time saver for them?
I would say it is a time saver. I'll be honest that it does, of course there's an initial introduction period where they have to try to map their process to an online process. So there may be some adjustments in the way they process the documents or, gather the information. But once they, work through that initial process of gathering all the information electronically, uploading it into the portal, then we've heard, reductions from, let's say, 8 hours or spending till midnight in a copy room assembling board books to maybe, 1 or 2 hours of assembling the online version of the board book. Because the nice thing is once they've assembled the board book, and initially if they do have some directors they're still holding out for the paper, they can just simply do a one-click print and print out those materials for those directors that probably or maybe aren't quite ready. Maybe they'll be ready 2 to 3 meetings from now to review them electronically. That happens less and less now given the introduction of the iPad, but it is still out there.
It's actually worthwhile remarking that a year or two ago when we had customers that were more tech savvy, that did want to go paperless, that the time to go paperless took much longer than today. So whereas 2 years ago you could count maybe on 9 to 12 months, even longer, nowadays it's typically 1 or 2 meetings because the benefits are pretty self-evident. And so, if the initial meeting is sort of the introduction, then the second meeting people feel comfortable, and then by the third meeting, they're willing to make the transition to digital complete.
Okay, next question. Could the board portal eliminate the need for a platform such as SharePoint?
So this is actually an interesting question because we are being that asked more and more by our customers. Look, SharePoint is a platform which is well established in corporate America as a collaboration and communication tool, and it's used up and down in large enterprises, companies with tens of thousands of employees. For those cases, I don't think that the board portal is a good alternative. But what we do believe is that for the layer of executives below the board, where depending on the size of the company, 2, 3, 4, 5% of the employees that are working at that elevated level, something like this with the two-way communication, with the security, with the mobility, with the ability to sign things on the fly electronically, those things are starting to get real traction, and they actually are adding the same value, and in many cases now more value than what you get in SharePoint. And a lot of reasons that prospects and customers are looking at it is because they see that the security that we have is so good compared to what you get in a large-scale commercial product like a SharePoint. There's some other benefits as well. We can set up separate team spaces so that you can run a multiplicity of initiatives. And we have some very large customers that are already doing that. And then the value that they point to when we ask them is this idea of segregating the content. So you can run parallel initiatives. Everybody has confidentiality requirements, but they also have confidentiality requirements within those initiatives. So every executive, as a rule, typically has a handful of those initiatives and can then separate them out and share with other members of that particular team. But the other thing, of course, is just the iPad's mobility, because it is something that everybody wants nowadays, and there really aren't that many products out there today that can give the same kind of user experience that we do with the board portal. At the end of the day, we think that a lot of the way that executives work isn't that different from the way that directors work. They all want document access. They want security. They're interested in mobility. They're all worried about discoverability. So all those concerns, they resonate at the executive level. So yes, we do see that opportunity. And in fact, like I mentioned, we've got some deals in progress right now.
Yeah, this whole concept of ease of use, especially even for the corporate secretary's office, being from home, not having to go through a VPN to access or upload materials. We've also heard, kind of like Joe was saying, from easy use of executives, they can never find anything in a SharePoint. So we definitely see more users kind of driving to BoardVantage to upload all the materials and manage that content.
I have what I think here is the final question. Joe and Mary, it says, I missed your comments about getting a actual product demonstration. Can you repeat that information?
So if I could, Katie, if I'm going to take control for just a second, I'm going to go to slide 20. We actually, because of this webinar today, we actually decided to do a special product demo that we refer to as Discover BoardVantage tomorrow, okay? Because today we wanted to stay at a higher level. We wanted to talk about, some of the decision points and some of the steps, and we didn't really go in any great depth into the product functionality. So tomorrow, July 26th at 11 o'clock Pacific, so 2 o'clock Eastern, there will be a 60-minute web demo, and we're going to have an in-depth look. We're going to go through the director experience. We'll show you how it works on the iPad, and then we'll do a walkthrough of the board book creation process. If you can't make that, there's other opportunities. We have one-on-one demos that you can register for on our website, or there's also on a weekly basis, every Thursday, there's something we call a demo day, which is, I think, at 11 o'clock, Mary?
10 a.m.
At 10 a.m., so 1 o'clock Eastern. Every Thursday, that's another opportunity. But if you want the nearest available opportunity, it's tomorrow at 2 Eastern. And you can register at BoardVantage.com for that.
Yeah, Joe and Mary, we had another question come in while you were answering that. Can board members print out material if they want a hard copy on a particular topic? Can management block printing?
Yes, that is controlled by the company, so management can block the printing. The nice thing is it can be by document as well. So there may be a very sensitive document that perhaps they don't want directors to print, so they can limit access just to viewing online. But if there's more general information that they're comfortable with directors printing out, then they can go ahead and do so. We see less and less of those type of questions or requests given the iPad and the mobility of the iPad. Directors, at that point really wouldn't have a requirement to print. They're just accessing from the iPad.
I think it's worthwhile pointing out there is a high degree of control. So if you have any one given document, as the corporate secretary or whoever administrates on the back end from the customer side, they can control every form of access, whether it's print, view, edit, what have you, and it can be set on a per user or a per group basis. And that's something that most customers really appreciate because that gives them the ability to share things with people at the level that they think that they're comfortable with.
Well, I want to thank Joe and Mary for a very comprehensive and substantive presentation. And just a couple things on closing. Thank you all again for attending, and we appreciate the support that you've given to these corporate board member webinars. This is certainly one of the topics that's of critical importance to boards and their companies and ultimately their shareholders, and we hope you found the presentation and the Q&A session informative. On your screen, you will see a survey asking for your feedback on today's webinar. It's very helpful for us if you don't mind taking the time to answer these questions and share any thoughts or suggestions for future webinars. Also, please feel free to visit our website at boardmember.com and click on Conferences to learn about the upcoming webinars and the full range of corporate board member conferences and peer exchanges. In particular, I want you to take note that our next webinar will be held on Thursday, August 2nd at noon Eastern Time, and that's entitled The Board's Role in Top-Line Growth and Strategy Oversight. I hope everyone has a great day. Please be sure to give us your feedback on the screen, and we'll look forward to being with you during our next event. Thanks a lot.